Hello, everyone. Welcome to the World of Work webinar series. This is our third webinar now, which seems wild, but we're hoping to do these every so often. My name is Alexandra Szabo. I am a lawyer at George Waggott Professional Corporation. You will hear from George Waggott later on today, but we specialize in employment and labor law. World of Work is a separate brainchild, if you will, where we're really just hoping to connect individuals from different workplaces, different positions that can come together with different ideas about the workplace and discuss either online in a format like this or discuss offline and connect elsewhere. So we also have Zoe. She can give a little wave down at the bottom there. We're going to be hearing from her second in our order of events. But first, what we have is I did a pre-recorded interview with Dr. John Presvelos. He unfortunately wasn't able to make our live time today, but he graciously set aside about 7 minutes to have a conversation with me about COVID and some tips and tricks about what we can be doing in the workplace, and just some really interesting insights that I didn't know. So you'll hear from him shortly. Just bear with me as I switch my share screens, which is always a scary moment, but I think it should go smoothly. So here we go. Hello, everyone. It's Alex here from World of Work, and I am having a little chat with Dr. John Presvelos. So, John, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I'm normally a sports medicine and emergency room doctor, but since COVID has started, I volunteered to work in some of the COVID assessment centers in Toronto, and I've also been doing follow-up calls with people who have been diagnosed with COVID. So this is a little bit changing my scope of work, but I'm happy to help out in any way I can.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure everyone who's is going to be watching this interview will thank you for your work as well. So we did create a couple of questions for you, mostly, COVID related / workplace related. So I'm just going to jump right into them. So our first question is, what are the most important things that you think individuals should know about COVID or COVID safety?
So I think at this point in time, we're reaching the end of February, and I am optimistic. I'm optimistic we're going in the right direction. Elderly patients in long-term care are getting vaccinated. Healthcare workers are getting vaccinated. I'm hopeful in the coming months we'll have widely available vaccines. As long as people are still taking the same precautions, it's about consistency and not letting your guard slip up when it comes to those habits, those good habits that are helping the numbers decrease now day after day.
Right. So just keep on track, keep washing your hands and wearing your mask and.
Exactly.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. And what can you tell us about all these new strands that we're hearing about in the news?
So it's quite normal. This is how viruses survive. This is how they continue to replicate. They change forms. There are variants, and this is how they escape immune systems being able to detect them. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen any good data yet to suggest these new variants are any more dangerous in terms of being deadlier, leading to more hospitalizations, or any different in terms of their clinical picture. There has been some evidence suggesting they might be more infectious, but our current tests test for those variants as well, so we're able to stay on top of those numbers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's good to know. I feel like there's a lot of different information out there about what's kind of coming down the line with those.
Definitely.
It's good to know. In terms of at the workplace, do you have any specific advice or strategies to stop the spread at say an office?
So I have a few tips that I've thought of, and through my experience with workplaces that have gone through outbreaks, I can say Maintaining the 6 feet of distance is key. In some workplaces that's possible and easy, in some it's not. Consistent use of masks is a big one. In certain workplace outbreaks, that's one of the key identified factors that led to the outbreak is inconsistent mask use. And finally, I'd say, certain jobs that can be done virtually, I would try to limit people's exposure face-to-face right now, as we still don't have widely available vaccines.
Right.
So if it's possible to do, a split part of the week at home versus at the workplace, I know that's possible for some places, but not for all.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see by my picture frames, I'm working from home most days, only going into the office when I have to. So
exactly.
I think, if people are able to do that, then just staying home, staying in lockdown is probably the best call, right?
Exactly.
And then in terms of if somebody does receive a positive COVID result or was maybe exposed and has to isolate, what would be the best practice for that individual returning to the workplace? Say for an example where they wouldn't be able to work remotely, they do have to go into the office. How would you coach them into going through that return?
So it's a little bit situation specific in terms of specific isolation instructions. But generally, I would say they're going to go through either a 10-day or 14-day quarantine period. And during that period, they absolutely cannot leave the house for any reason except, medical emergency if they're having emergency type symptoms. After that quarantine period is up, they are allowed to return to work if they've been symptom-free for at least 24 to 48 hours. And the important thing to know for the employer is, to be notified as soon as possible so that arrangements can be made. I always tell my patients that, let them know as soon as you can. But also for employers, it's to know that the patient doesn't necessarily need to have a negative result in order to return to work. We know that after that quarantine period, whether it's 10 or 14 days, the virus is out of their system. They're not going to be contagious. They're not going to spread it to anybody else at work. But it's important to know that there is a limitation in the testing where once a person does get a positive test, sometimes they can stay positive for weeks or even months after that test.
I didn't know that. That's very important for employers who are concerned about the well-being of their employees, but also having them return to work. So
yeah. They can rest assured that if they've finished their quarantine period and they're not having symptoms, they are not contagious to anybody else around.
Oh yeah, that's excellent to know. I don't think I knew that before you said that. So, and then my last one, just to wrap things up here, as we approached the anniversary of the state of emergency here in Ontario, I think it was right around St. Patrick's Day, and that's almost a month from now. What do you think the next 12 months are going to look like? Just in general, however you want to take that question.
Well, I like to stay optimistic, and I'm trying to stay optimistic like a lot of us are. It's, it's difficult as we go on, but I am optimistic that vaccines will become widely available. We'll be able to get back to some sort of new normal. Hopefully restaurants, small businesses will be able to open up again and have the public enter their workplaces. But I think it comes down to individual responsibility again. If you're having symptoms, stay home. And I think that's going to become a lot more normal for us now, whereas in the past, maybe we continue to go to work with some minor symptoms. I think we're going to have to become, much more in tune with the symptoms and treat them accordingly.
Right. So just
hopeful.
Yeah, good. That is good. I hope to, sooner than later be able to sit on a patio on a warm day and around a couple people other than, my immediate circle. So
exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you are super busy with everything that's going on, COVID and non-COVID related. So thanks again for taking the time to speak with us. And I mean, hopefully I never need to see you face to face in the next couple of months, but once we're through this all, I hope to be able to meet you face to face.
That's fantastic. Thank you for having me, and have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay, so that was Dr. John, as I now, as he's my friend, I friendly refer to him as. But I know that's a lot of information that some of us have already heard, but I think it is always refreshing to hear from a firsthand source on a maybe more informal platform like this. So lots of thanks to Dr. John wherever he is right now. I'm not sure if he's here watching. So I'm going to head back over to our lovely PowerPoint presentation. Okay, there we go. So there's the correct spelling of Dr. John's name in case any of you do want to reach out. He has said that his information is available online from a quick Google search. So feel free to follow up if you wish, or you're looking to add a nice doctor friend to your inner circle. So next we're going to hear from Zoe. We have at George Waggott Professional Corporation have had the pleasure of working with Zoe for a while now. As you can see from the logo, she is with WeWork, and she is going to speak to us about the future of workplace functionality. So Zoe, you can take it away.
Hi, everyone. So as Alex mentioned, I work with WeWork in Toronto and have also had the pleasure of seeing George Waggott's firm and team grow over the last few years. I'm here to talk about the future of workplace functionality, and I'll preface that much of what I share today is based on conversations with business owners, real estate professionals, as well as reports from publications like the Brookfield Institute and Deloitte Insights, to name a few. So I'm sure we're all tired of hearing the terms the new normal or having to utter them, the future of work. We're here, this is the future. And it's not just that the workplace has been disrupted because restrictions have stopped people from entering the office. It's been disrupted, in my opinion, because now, as a result of these restrictions, the functions of the office have changed. So this impacts not only someone like me who works for a company selling Workspace, but also HR managers, corporate real estate teams, and of course, the employee. 20 years ago, an office with a good address was considered critical after you incorporated, or else you couldn't house the team you wanted to hire. And today, you can attract top talent with a great website. So organizations now need to look at what the role of the workplace means for its people and how it can be organized for them in a way that's specific, so more specifically the types of teams they employ, their industry, and their clients. Over the past year, depending on who you asked and when you asked it, I'm sure you've all seen the surveys showed people, either never wanted to return to the office or that people couldn't wait to see their coworkers again. The reality is that it's both true. We've been oscillating on a high frequency because the feeling of working from home was novel, and now going back into the office will feel novel again. And this will likely even out and see people returning to the office, but for specific purposes on a much more flexible basis. And flexibility can be enabled via an on-demand carte blanche menu, for example. You're offering a massive training room you can book on a quarterly basis for your hackathon, or let's say it's a one-off boardroom you need to get for that big client pitch. Maybe you're a startup of 5 people and they need a bit of community, so you get them a pay-as-you-use membership. And when they're not using that carte blanche menu, how are they working remotely? High-touch collaboration and water cooler chat are still the hardest things to replicate virtually when people work from home. So that's where digital tools need to come into play. After leaders determine what the workplace uniquely means for their group, they need to understand that the workplace exists as a symbiotic existence of both its physical and digital assets. So they're not separate entities of place and tools, they're one, and you'll see corporate real estate and IT leaders working much more closely together as they make strategic decisions. So what's next in the realm of physical and digital assets? In terms of physical assets, whether you're choosing a flexible option like WeWork or you're leasing an office space and managing it yourself, these will remain a reality for most companies, at least for the next 10 years. While there'll be massive savings for companies reducing their footprint, those who manage their own space will be spending a considerable amount for overtime HVAC, PPE, cleaning supplies, And with the gradual return of workers, leaders will need to create a rotating schedule for those who come in, A teams on odd weeks, B teams on even weeks. And if they're companies with headquarters everywhere, they'll have temperature checks and wristbands indicating people have passed inspection. Ultimately, having a base of some sort will be desirable for people, although companies are getting really creative and offering allowances, for example, for their employees to invest in their home office. So I think this is a good segue into digital assets. Companies have been investing in tools like Slack and Zoom for years, but now instead of it just to talk from across the room without getting up, they now need to leverage these for its full potential. So for example, hosting a virtual training with breakout rooms, simulating an in-person workshop. If these tools are used correctly, it can enable remote workers to collaborate and connect both formally and casually. These applications are getting better and companies are investing in them, but we're still in the infancy stage of adoption. Things glitch, people still don't know how to use them properly, which is why going fully remote is hard to conceive for most companies. Technologies like AR and VR, they'll do a much better job mimicking in-person conversations, offering nuances that can be missed just from a video conference. But this is, it's not hit critical mass for workplaces. It's still too expensive to scale. It's also important to remember that when integrating digital assets as part of a remote work strategy, new mindsets have to be adopted. For example, there's an alarming number of leaders who are investing in spyware to ensure their people aren't slacking off working from home. Seems like a pretty backward solution, as leaders should be setting expectations for timelines and levels of communication, so their teams are delivering on these expectations and only questioning them and their performance if they're not being met. So I'll wrap up now. The takeaway here is that the function of the office has been disrupted, but it's actually now much more people-centric and bottom-up. So leaders are asking what type of work their teams perform as they choose what kind of assets to invest in, whether digital or physical. What did the latest employee survey reveal about their preference for returning to the workplace? Questions like those, where you're relying on your people to tell you what they want. Most progressive organizations are going to shift their mindsets about what is the expectation of a 9-to-5 workday, 5 days a week, if people are working in different time zones or they're not all coming in on the same day. This is a different playbook for engagement. In summary, rely on physical assets intentionally and flexibly, and invest in technology that complements your physical assets, enhancing remote work, not just to mimic what would have happened in the old office, but rather how we can bring together a much more disparate and empowered workforce.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zoe. That was awesome. I think, how you prefaced it at the beginning with, we're always talking about the future of work, but we're in it. We're operating day to day, and that's something that we need to take stock of and really develop, as you said, the different areas in order to make the most of our teams and our current present situation. So I will also say that, shameless little plug for WeWork, that we have thoroughly enjoyed the flexibility that is offered from that space, being able to go in as we need to over the past year now, unfortunately, but it's been great, and it's always lovely to see your face there, Zoe. Also, very quickly, I think we have a minute here, but we had a question from Joshua O'Grady, who dubs himself a long-time listener, first-time question asker. He says, "Hi, Zoe. Do you see the future of co-working spaces becoming more of a foundation for large organizations to create remote pods for geographically aligned team members, or more for startups starting out their business?"
The annoyingly diplomatic answer is both, Josh.
Right.
You'll continue to see both types of organizations exist. And I think we're really seeing that demand from both ends of the spectrum, whether you're a very early company with a handful of people or you're multinational and it makes the most sense for you to have these little pods all over the world.
Very diplomatic, but very true. And thanks, Joshua, for that question, and thanks, Zoe, for your answer. So we are going to move on now. Let me just get this all set up. Okay, so George is going to be speaking to us, about workplace law and how it is pivoting into 2021. So George, take it away.
Thanks very much. And we've got a hard stop in 9 minutes, and I'll make sure we honor that. And I'm going to go back to Josh's question, and for some reason his label as sun enthusiast didn't get mentioned there. So I hope you're enjoying the sun. It's getting sunnier here in Toronto, and hopefully in parts east as well, Josh. Now, what I'm going to say, it is a way of answering the question, but it's also sort of tying together what we've heard. I mean, I think there's a potential analogy between workplaces and places where you make music, right? You know, we've had to change how that happens. We've had to change how we configure things, but you know, the band still needs a venue for their gigs, and so I think we probably, some of the things that we've gone through, you know, we've heard from Dr. John around the medical side of things. COVID is still here. Many would probably say it's likely to continue to be here for a prolonged period. We've got, thankfully, Zoe's given some excellent insight into just the business view of work. And I think what's probably fair to say is, you know, the thing called a workplace isn't going away. It's changing, but it's not changing next year. It's already in the middle of a change. The scope of that change and the extent of that change will play itself out into some legal issues that I'm going to flag. I'm delighted. Zoe's a gem because she kind of teed up one of the topics I'm going to focus on, which is digital. She talked about digital tools. I want to just flag privacy for organizations and what we're going to see. We heard about this. I think she mentioned 10 years ago. I'm going to say something about something that happened almost 20 years ago in the legal realm that I think is probably something everybody needs to have on their radar. And it's one of these deceiving things. It's not sitting on the windshield right now, but it's a massive rock on the road that we're all going to drive into if we don't be careful. Could we flip to the next slide, please, Alex? All right, so what I'm trying to do just to flag some issues and understand what employers are going to deal with, and there will be corresponding claims from employees. You know, COVID has had a massive knock-on effect on what we do as employers and what people are doing in the legal realm, and we're going to see that play itself out. People's tolerance for, you know, waiting for the end of the COVID times and this somewhat artificial delineation between the before times and the after times. I think people are going to understand that there is no such bright line. It's a much more fluid situation. So we're going to have a number of claims or conversations and related potential disputes that will emerge. Just flagging a variety of areas, but there could be more. The first one is just to talk about temporary absences. When people were told to go home for 2 weeks in the middle of March of last year, it was novel, and it was generally not the source of much dispute or controversy, especially since most employers at that point in time were generally paying people. We saw some, depending on the industry, we saw some instances of furlough, breaks in work, people basically being unable to work for some period of time. Depending on the part of the world people were in, there were government efforts to fund people being off work or subsidize people remaining in employment. The theory being, if you maintain the employment relationship, you maintain you know, the person's connection to the organization. When it all resumes, they come back to work as though it didn't happen. But what we've now got is a bit of a patchwork around the position, both in terms of, in Canada, things like benefits like the CERB that transitioned to EI, but also in the different provinces across the country, which are the drivers of our employment law. We've got a different set of rules around whether somebody can or cannot be on some form of temporary leave, layoff, whatever it might be. Whichever that set of rules is, those are likely to be coming to an end in 2021. So the leather really hits the road. If the organization doesn't have work for the person and they're not going to be able to pay them, then they're going to have to pay to terminate them. So that is where I think we're going to see quite a bit of action on how to do that. There may be some ways to be creative, extending those, amending the contract terms, reassigning people work. The thing that I want to emphasize is, because I am fortunate enough to have a number of employers that I work with across industries and geographies, there's lots of hiring going on, right? It's not the case that there's all these people that aren't working. Yes, there's more of that than we wish, but there's also a lot of hiring going on. So I think really many organizations are going to see the next year as a real opportunity, and they're going to partly do it on the basis of how they deal with issues like the temporary absence. Okay, remote work. We heard a little bit, first two speakers in their own topic areas or in their own way talked about the prevalence of remote work. I think a lot of people would say that, over the course of the first, call it, month or two of periods of restrictions, we probably did what most people thought would have taken 5 or 10 years in terms of advancing the ability to understand and accomplish work. And I think what that now has significant implications about how permanent that might become, how organizations are going to get configured, and it's kind of got a push and pull. One is that there are some organizations. So good example is the CEO of Goldman Sachs, who basically says we're not letting people work remotely, where everybody's coming back. The other end of the spectrum, you've got Shopify saying, we're basically not going to have an office. We're happy to be a virtual organization pretty much indefinitely. So you've got different organizations and sizes, which will have different views of that. The reason I'm going to stick with the music analogy is, again, different people have different views on whether that's going to be effective or not. We're going to see more court claims. We've seen quite a few in 2020 in the tail end. I think we're going to see even more of them in 2021. People who aren't working are going to file claims. Next slide, please. And one area specifically that's got a lot of scrutiny, for those of you who followed the sort of tale of Uber last year, there's a Supreme Court of Canada case basically said that you could potentially access employment law if you're an Uber worker in Ontario. There's been fairly high profile legislation in California. They basically put a ballot initiative in place that allowed them to amend their law, California being one of the most employee-friendly jurisdictions in the United States. And then in the last 2 weeks, we've had a decision in the UK, a place where I worked at one time, and the ruling is that the Uber drivers there are what's called a worker, which is essentially an intermediate category. So I think we're going to see a lot more scrutiny of, are you an employee? Are you a pure contractor? Are you something else? And how will that work into what rights they have? And again, I think we have to look at that as potentially an opportunity for organizations. If you're willing to properly structure arrangements with people, you may have a bit more flexibility, but with some of that freedom, the question is what level of responsibility you have as an organization or employer. Okay, next slide. I'm going to just talk about privacy in a bit of a summary way, but for those that haven't seen it, Alex and I have put together a paper. We like our own Kool-Aid, so you can certainly drink it if you want, but and Zoe just gets a drink right at that moment. Isn't that great? So there's some of the detail here. The paper runs 6 pages. I'm not going to read it verbatim because we're going to respect time. But the point is that 20 years ago, April of 2020, Canada adopted the existing legislation, PIPEDA. What we have is the government came out in November with, it's basically 2 companion laws. The first is called the Privacy Protection Act, and that is pretty closely aligned to some changes we've seen in Europe with the changes to the GDPR, as well as the law. And again, California is driving a lot of what's happening in the workplaces. So the changes to California law and the related compliance. So what we're going to see from that is organizations are going to be under more scrutiny because the law will, and the government said this is an easy thing. We're going to have more resources committed to it. So what organizations are going to have to do is manage how they deal with data. And just think about the difference in the last 20 years. There was no such thing as iPhones. There was people being able to work with cloud-based solutions, people doing online commerce. All the things people now do that are connected with and part of having a remote and agile organization, all that volume of data, we're going to see the law in Canada at least catch up to some degree. And what that means is there's going to have to be a more stringent set of requirements about what consent you have, what program you have to manage people's data. And related to that is there's going to be a stronger set of resources from government to enforce it. So we all need to pay attention to it. Thanks. I am up with my time.
That was almost the classic I'm on mute situation. George, thank you so much. You know, you're such an expert in everything that you've spoken about, and I highly recommend if anyone who is currently listening to reach out to George directly. If, as he said, we do have a paper that speaks to the privacy matter, but anything else related to either the presentation or employment and labor law in general, George's email address is on the screen, as is Zoe's. And part of what we're doing here is we're hoping to bring people together and to keep the conversation going offline and get some people together. So I just wanted to say thank you from the World of Work team for everyone who took time out of their day today to attend. We really appreciate it. You will be receiving an email with a link to the replay of this. So if you think of anyone in your network that could benefit from what we spoke about today, please feel free to send it along. And we will most definitely be in touch about our next webinar. So keep an eye out for that. So thank you everyone so much, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you.